Okay. So now on to our plenary speaker, who is truly a friend of mine. I have also known him years. I don't have his bio with me, actually. It's on the back of this book, but I'm not going to read it. And so let me just share a couple of things about him. I mean, he literally is changing the world. He is investing in the smartest ways possible to change the world. He heads up the biggest philanthropic organization in this country, specifically focused on what you do. I mean, their endowment is over $1 billion, all right? And his career has been focused specifically on what you do. He founded and was the president of the Institute for Higher Education Policy before he became the president of the Lumina Foundation. And even when he was on Capitol Hill, he worked around financial aid, access issues. He knows Gear Up better than anybody in so many ways, which is one of the reasons we asked him to come. Now, I will say that Jamie is a good friend, and I've embarrassed myself with Jamie, or in front of Jamie, probably a number of times over the years. I want to give you 3 quick ones. Yeah, there's more than that. Jamie and I talk every now and then, and the thing about Jamie is why he's a friend is he's such a helper. He's always helped me throughout my career for, it wasn't even clear to me why. And I remember one time I called him and I'm like, Jamie, I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life. This was pretty recently. And he said to me, oh, okay. And I'm like, well, what do you think? And he goes, Ranjit, we're pretty much like the same age. And I said, so? Tell me, what should I do? You have all this wisdom. And then recently, last year, he called me up and he said, hey, I'm going to be in DC. And I said, great. Why don't we connect? What are you doing here? And he's like, oh, it's my book release. And I didn't say anything. And I got off the phone and I thought, book release? This is his book, America Needs Talent, right? Jamie's got 2 kids. I have 2 kids, as you know from this morning. He is overseeing an organization with an endowment of $1 billion. And I thought to myself, he wrote a book. I've been ABD for 14 years. And then finally, my last embarrassment with Jamie was this. I read the book, and I called him up, and I said, hey, can you come speak for a number of reasons? We're going to show you a video in a second. And so here's this guy, right, with this massive endowment to do good work. I run a national nonprofit, and I read the book. It's fascinating, and it's just pushing us to another edge of what we should do in college access and college readiness. But when you read it, it reads in parts like he's talking to you. It's quite informal in parts. And so there was this thing where he put in parentheses, he said, I went to college in the 80s and have the Skinny Ties and REM albums to prove it. So I called Jamie up to talk to him about, coming here and Gear Up and NCCEP. And the first thing I said to him, I said, hey, you got to speak, man. I got the perfect walk-up song for you, REM. And when I got off the phone, I was like, did I really just say that to the head of the Lumina Foundation? And he said, okay, but just don't make it's the end of the world as we know it. And so we certainly took that into consideration. But here's why we brought him. College access, college readiness, it's an evolving field, right? We haven't fixed the access problem, but it's got to change because the world is changing. So that means all of us as professionals have to think about what we're doing with our students and what we're preparing them for, the world that's coming. That's what this book talks about in terms of America Needs Talent. So we just wanted to cut to a quick 1-minute video that sort of sets up Jamie talking about why he wrote the book and what's in it.
In the 20th century, think about all the things that we accomplished. We didn't just cure polio and win the race to the moon. We also helped raise Europe up from its post-war ashes, electrified every corner of the nation, created and paved interconnected highways from coast to coast, and created the internet, which spawned many of the tech enterprises that are, at this point, central to our daily lives. But how did a relatively young nation pull it off? Talent. Here in the 21st century, we need talent, and we're going to have to produce that talent. We're going to have to deploy it in ways that's very different from what we've done in the past. We can't hope for the outcome. We've got to produce the outcome. I think the United States' belief that it is number one in every category is no longer supported by the facts. Other countries are now doing what the United States did. Many of our partners and competitors around the world are starting to learn the lessons from the United States and apply it in their context. We've got to do the same. We cannot simply rely on our historic success. We've actually got to focus on what we want to do to continue to be competitive going forward. We've got to have a strategy. We've got to focus on talent development and deployment as a singular element of our success as a country.
Jamie shares the same urgency that you do around shaping this country and shaping youth lives. He's a friend of Gear Up. He always has been. Please join me in welcoming Jamie Merisotis.
Couldn't have picked another song. Couldn't have picked another song. Thank you very much, Ranjit. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just delighted to be here, and I want to say how much I appreciate the invitation from Ranjit and his colleagues in order to be here at this year's conference. I've had the privilege of working with Gear Up and with NCCEP as an organization, and many of you in this room, not just Ranjit, but Betty and Alex and Aaron and so many people in this room, really for much of my professional life. And it's an honor to be with you today, and I want to say just a special note of thanks to say how thrilled I am to share the stage with my friend and great colleague, Ranjit, whose leadership and vision I think is critical at this stage of NCCEP's growth and national leadership. I gotta say, though, that it's a little bit disconcerting to follow a video where you actually have the starring role. Little odd. By now, I'll be honest, I'm pretty used to hearing myself talk, but it's a little strange to watch myself talk. And if nothing else, I now have a greater appreciation for your perspective. So I'm going to cut to the chase and be as brief and to the point as possible. So I really want to tell you how truly thrilled I am to be here today and have the chance to elaborate a bit on some of the points that I made in that video and, of course, in the book. I honestly believe that the ideas that I put together in that book, ideas that I'd had in my head for a number of years, hold some important lessons for you, lessons that I think can inform and enhance the wonderful work that all of you are doing in your communities and on your campuses as a part of Gear Up. And believe me, I have a deep and abiding appreciation for what all of you do. Your work is critically important. In fact, when we consider the national stresses and strains that we're all feeling these days, the pain and sorrow and frustration surrounding recent events in St. Paul and Baton Rouge and Dallas, well, I can't imagine a better group of professionals to lift up. You've always been an important part of the solution to America's problems, an antidote to what ails our society. And today, I think that's truer than ever. As some of you know, I've been working for decades in this field of higher education policy and college access. And in fact, back in 1998, as the president of the Institute for Higher Education Policy, I played a very small role in the inception and launch of Gear Up. In the 2 decades since, I've tried to do whatever I can, do my part, as an advocate for the important work that Gear Up and this great national organization, NCCEP, do so well. That is, helping communities prepare low-income and educationally underserved students to succeed in post-secondary education. Frankly, it's been tremendously rewarding to witness Gear Up's growth and impact over the years. Since those early days in the late 90s, I'm just delighted to see the top-line numbers. Nearly 600,000 students served at more than 500 institutions in 43 states. Impressive. Gear Up has literally changed the lives of millions of Americans. But even more impressive, I think, than its current scale, even more important than its past impact, what's really remarkable about Gear Up is its future promise, its potential. the March to a Million that Ranjit talked about this morning, the theme of this year's conference, I think shows clearly that you're aware of this potential and are working to realize it. Still, I think it's not crazy to suggest that the 1 million beneficiaries is really just a stepping stone to even more people being served. In fact, if I can be so bold as to say, it's possible that not even all of you here today fully appreciate the importance of your work, not just to the students that you serve, but to your community, to your state, to your region, indeed to the nation. My goal today is to try to drive home that message, to underscore the point that the work that you do isn't just important or meaningful or admirable. Your work has always been all of those things, of course, but in today's world, enabling post-secondary success isn't just a worthwhile endeavor, it's an existential imperative, a vital national task. And because it's vital, you, and really all of us, must embrace this work with a new sense of urgency and commitment. And that's not all, because we also have to work in new ways. The potential is there, but to fully realize that potential, we can't just work more enthusiastically. We also have to work more creatively and, frankly, more efficiently. In short, we need to work harder and smarter. We need to try innovative approaches and then apply what works so we can maximize the scale and the impact of our efforts. And why should we do these things? Why should we do all that we can to increase post-secondary opportunity and success among all Americans? Well, I think it boils down to that one word, talent. As the title of the book says, America needs talent. And these days, it's becoming quite clear that post-secondary learning is the best and perhaps the most important way to supply that talent. Economists and labor market experts have been telling us for years that a post-secondary credential is all but indispensable for anyone who hopes to maintain a middle-class lifestyle. The knowledge and skills that are required for success in today's workplace go beyond what can be gained in high school. In fact, a report released just last week, 2 weeks ago, by the Georgetown Center for Education in the Workforce and the Economy makes that point more strongly than ever. We've been talking about these things for several years now, about the fact that, for example, 2/3 of all jobs require post-secondary education. But I think that report, titled America's Divided Recovery, lays out even more telling economic facts. First, it says that in our slow recovery from the recent Great Recession, 99% of all job growth, that is 11.5 million of the 11.6 million jobs that have been created between 2010 and January 2016, have gone to workers with at least some post-secondary education. Think about that. Second, the report shows that workers with some college education now make up 65% of total employment in the United States. And finally, it points out that Americans who hold at least a bachelor's degree now earn 57% of all income, of all of the wages of Americans in the United States. In other words, those who lack a post-secondary credential are increasingly and permanently being left behind. Last month, when I was speaking at the Aspen Ideas Festival, I heard this truth expressed succinctly by another speaker, Horatio Rosansky, CEO of consulting giant Booz Allen Hamilton. In fact, he put it into one sentence when he said, "In our knowledge economy, education inequality is income inequality." And of course, this isn't just about money or jobs. We all know that post-secondary success is linked to so much more: higher levels of home ownership, better health and health care, increased civic and social engagement, higher rates of voting and volunteerism, enhanced appreciation of diverse cultures. The benefits of post-secondary success are huge, they're wide-ranging, and they're essentially permanent, often extending far beyond the individual student to improve the lives of generations to follow. In short, it's no stretch to say that post-secondary learning is the key to our shared future as a nation. So let's talk for a minute about that future and about how we can work together to actually create it. I want to return to that important concept I mentioned just a bit ago, the concept that forms the central theme of my book, talent. Now, I think the first thought that I'd like to share is one that might seem self-evident. That is that talent is the key to national success. It always has been. To fully understand this, I think it's important to recognize where we were as a nation in the 20th century and what's different today. In many ways, the 20th century defined who we are as a nation for ourselves and the world. Now, this picture you see on the screens here is an example of pre-World War II America, circa 1939. And okay, I'll be honest with you, this picture's a little bit of a setup because if you look very carefully at that guy sitting on the roof, see that guy with the mandolin in his hands? You might notice that he looks a little bit like me. That's my father, Peter Merisotis. Now, in this picture, he's 17 years old, somewhere in New Hampshire. My dad's parents immigrated to New Hampshire from Greece just a few years before he was born, and by the time of the photo that you're looking at, he dropped out of high school to support his family. His father wasn't able to find work during the Depression, so my dad used his great skill as a guitar and mandolin player, developed beginning when he was 7 years old. I've explained that to my 8-year-old, by the way, to help the family survive, literally survive. Now, a few years later, he was drafted. He was shot down in a European theater and was a POW. He returned home in 1945 to eventually settle into a working-class career. My parents, my brothers and I, and my grandmother all lived in a 2-bedroom house in a blue-collar community near Hartford, Connecticut. My parents never made it to college, and the truth is we never fully made it to the middle class. But with the combined effort of both parents, my dad as a traveling salesman, my mother as a secretary for the local police department, we were okay. But my parents were driven by the idea that all of their sons had to go to college, and they saved every penny that they had to make it possible. And though it wasn't nearly enough, I like to call myself a walking advertisement for every government, college, and church financial aid program you can think of. My brothers and I all ended up making it through, doing reasonably well, and hopefully doing some good in the world. You know, in a way, we succeeded the way millions of other American families did. We were the products of an era that was known for a can-do American spirit. For proof of that, just look at what this nation accomplished in the 20th century. During that time period, which Life magazine publisher Henry Luce famously called the American century, we were driven by a unifying belief in the very idea of America, where hard work and self-determination reap rewards. It was the American century because we believed, because we had the American people, and they had the talent that made us the world's leader in just about everything. Think about what we accomplished in that century. As I said in the introductory video, we cured polio, we reached the moon, we won the Cold War, we even created the internet. How did we do it? Well, we did it with talent. But I think it's considering here in the early part of the 21st century, do we still have it take? Do we still believe? Can we muster that talent to do it all over again? Well, I certainly believe that we can, but we can't do it the way we did it in the past. The landscape has just changed too dramatically. God-given talent like my dad's is just not sufficient in the 21st century. Global competition has soared. 2 million jobs are unfilled in the American economy right now because of a lack of qualified talent, and 3/4 of CEOs say that finding qualified applicants is their top concern as an employer. The demands of the modern workplace and society are greater than ever, and they're constantly changing. In short, the recipe for 21st century success is far more complex than it was in the 20th century, and the need for talent, all kinds of talent, is greater than ever. Now, what exactly do I mean by talent? Well, in the book, this is what I say. I say that talent is what happens when knowledge, skills, and abilities are honed by things like education and experience in a way that benefits both individuals and society at large. The point here is that talent is much more than innate ability. It's not merely about being able to shoot a sweet three-pointer or play an amazing sonata. It's about values and judgment. It's knowledge of particular domains and the human context that give it meaning. And just as our society has evolved, so must our view of talent and our means for developing it. That means that thoughtful, deliberate choices have to be made by government, by the private sector, by education and individuals to grow talent in America. Now, in the book, I lay out 5 ways to get to this more talented society. You can see those here. And I think my approach is that these different ways of rethinking talent development and deployment work together to create a new talent paradigm for the nation. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on each of these, but let me just cover a few. When I say we need to unleash private sector innovation, I mean we need to give private sector players the tools that they actually need to be more consciously focused on talent development and deployment. Innovation thrives when education and employment are tightly intertwined and when both are focused on the real world needs of citizens. We need to do more to tighten that connection using strategies like supporting employer investments in post-secondary learning and creating incentives to use and expand social innovation tools like impact investing. And in suggesting a new role at the federal level, what I'm advocating is that we realign the work now being done by 3 different federal entities: the entire U.S. Department of Education, the Labor Department's Education and Training Administration, and the Citizenship and Immigration Services talent and recruitment functions under the Department of Homeland Security. Right now, each of these entities plays a distinct and important role in talent cultivation. What I'm proposing is that we take these 3 and merge them together to create a single new entity that I call the U.S. Department of Talent. Now, I got to tell you, when I wrote the book, I thought this was the craziest idea I had in the book. It turns out it's the #1 thing the national press has written about. There was an article about it in the Atlantic magazine and other places. There's nothing like a presidential campaign to advance much crazier ideas than yours and help your ideas seem reasonable in the meantime. Actually, the thing about the idea, I think, is that it purposefully aligns agencies that have long been disconnected and in a lot of ways bureaucratically entrenched. It inspires and implements new approaches, one that focuses squarely on outcomes. I think this kind of an agency would send a powerful message to our citizens, to employers, and to our global partners and competitors. It would show that the federal government is serious and strategic about its role in developing, harnessing, and actually deploying our talent. We also can upgrade our talent development efforts by tapping into the tremendous potential of our nation's cities and urban areas. I believe we need to see cities not as challenges to be solved, not as educational and social problems to be fixed, but as hubs of talent, places where innovation and creativity actually thrive. Communities that are succeeding in this talent hub concept are finding that cultivating talent, not just attracting it and retaining it, is the most successful strategy. Now, certainly, I get it. Attracting talent from other communities is a viable approach to economic development, one that we've seen a lot of cities use successfully for decades. But talent attraction also has some costs, and I don't just mean things like urban sprawl and traffic congestion. One is that when you attract talent from the outside, you can often end up essentially being engaged in a zero-sum game. Because think about it. One city's increase in talent could very well come at the expense of another's. That's not going to solve America's talent challenge. Equally important, though, I think, is that in many metro areas, talent attraction actually increases social inequity. And the reason, I think, is obvious, because what happens is, as the creative and entrepreneurial classes move in, the local residents, who are often low income and minority populations, they're often left behind in that urban renaissance. And we've seen that in city after city in this country. So the cities that succeed as talent hubs are the ones that confront these equity and demographic issues. Yeah, sure, they can attract talent, but they have to work hard to develop and keep their homegrown talent. They close attainment gaps, and they work to ensure that progress is broadly shared. The successful talent hubs are those whose various sectors and leaders work together, deliberately, collaboratively, and harmoniously. They set goals and they work hard to attain them. They listen to what employers actually say. They foster a sense of place, and they offer multiple pathways to success for all types of people. That brings me to the 4th way to boost the nation's talent quotient, one that I expect resonates strongly with many of you in this room. Namely, I believe it's time to rethink our entire approach to immigration. For far too long, and in my view, at great societal cost, our public debates about immigration have overwhelmingly been focused on who to keep out. This is just plain wrong. We are at a terribly troubling point in our recent history, one where immigrants, entire religious groups, and minorities are treated with disrespect and derision. To me, as a son of immigrants and as an advocate for the great strength our nation derives from diversity and otherness, this is the most un-American idea I can imagine. This nation was built by and succeeds because of the great energy, creativity, and sense of unity we all bring to the country, including immigrants. So rather than spending all of our energy and time thinking about how to deal with border security and those kind of issues, placing blame and building walls, we have to find ways to think more holistically, more systemically about immigration in terms of talent. In other words, what type of a society do we want? And how do we recruit and develop the talent to actually help build it? Our immigration policy should be results-oriented, not restrictive. It has to be aimed squarely, not solely, of course, but squarely at meeting the nation's talent needs. That means that we should emulate what's worked in other places, like the skills-based models that are in place in places like Australia and Canada. And we need to complement those kind of efforts by actually improving education and training policies to better educate the immigrants who are already here. In other words, we need to transform our national argument about immigration into a productive discussion, a discussion that leads to an actual policy focused on intently building a better future for all of us as Americans. And that brings me to the final way to boost the nation's talent quotient. As a nation, we need to take a new approach to higher education. We need to redesign the system so that it better serves today's students, the ones who have to succeed in today's and tomorrow's world. You know, for all of its good points, today's higher education system, frankly, can't produce the talent that we need going forward. It's too unaffordable for far too many of our fellow citizens, especially for many of those who all of you work with each day, those who are non-white or first generation, who attend part-time, students who work, students who have children. This system doesn't produce enough graduates, I think I've already made that point, and it doesn't always give those graduates the knowledge, skills, and abilities that they need to ensure their long-term success. So to address these problems, to close attainment gaps and maximize talent development, we have to redesign the system so that it better serves today's students and meets society's needs. We need a system that's affordable, that is student-centered, and that's relentlessly focused on genuine learning. That type of a system, I think, is absolutely necessary if we hope to produce the human capital, the talent that the 21st century demands. Again, this effort isn't just about meeting labor market or economic needs. It goes much deeper than that. The recent tragic events we've all borne witness to in recent months point to real divisions in this nation that must be addressed. Of course, I'm not saying that better and more equitable education will mend all of the rents in our social fabric. Complex problems defy single solutions. We all know that. But I also know this, and I'm sure you'll agree with me. Unless we achieve real equity and excellence in education, our social fabric can never be whole and strong. There are no quick fixes or magic bullets when it comes to building the type of post-secondary system that can deliver equity and excellence, the redesigned system that our nation so desperately needs. But as you all know very well from your work, there are things that can and should be done. First and foremost, I think we need to see everything we do through the lens of students, who are the center of the post-secondary learning ecosystem. Institutional concerns, workforce connections, public policy issues, all of these things matter, of course, But the main concern, that number one priority, are the students and what they learn, the outcomes they achieve from their education. These student outcomes must be what we care the most about. And that means we need to work to help students attain the best possible of those outcomes. For example, students obviously are better served when they have clear, structured pathways to meaningful credentials, when they get support along the way that helps them stay on those pathways, and when those pathways connect seamlessly to further education and career opportunities. As professionals dedicated to expanding opportunity and fostering student success, you already know this, and you're already part of the new system that this nation needs, a huge and indispensable part, in fact, one that should be expanded and enhanced and empowered. Gear Up can be a vital starting point, a catalyst for the changes we so desperately need in higher education today. It's no longer enough for you to operate existing programs or simply help those programs grow. What's needed now is the next level of thinking and action, new ideas and efforts that lead to significant increases in post-secondary preparation and ultimately student success. To fully engage in this redesign process, to really embrace your role as an engine for talent development, operate your program as an innovation laboratory. Brainstorm new ideas and approaches, pilot and prove them, and then publicize and mobilize around the ones that work. Focus first on serving your students, of course, but don't stop there. Strive also to be genuine leaders in the process of education redesign. So, what can we expect to achieve if that process succeeds and if we successfully implement some of the other ideas that I've talked about today and in the book? I think we can imagine a very different country from the one that we now have. Because I think in the second American century, we can be a much more equitable society, one in which employers fully recognize and realize the value of a diverse talent pool, and where policymakers use education strategies and social innovation efforts to broaden opportunity and boost success for all Americans. So much is possible in the second American century when America has the talent that it needs to be prosperous. But the path to get us there is surely quite different from the one that we followed in the 20th century. This takes me back to where I started, back to when my father was in his late teens, and America was a very different place. In the years that followed, my parents worked hard, they made their own way, and they created opportunity for themselves and for their children. Today, thanks in large part to their insistence on education, to the idea that we need to advance our knowledge and skills and abilities in very concrete and deliberate ways, those children, these 4 really good-looking guys, are successful adults. But our paths to success weren't the same ones that our parents took. And the path that my kids will need to take in the coming years, along with all of your own children and grandchildren, that path will have to be different from mine. Profoundly different, in fact. My friends, I believe now is the time to start clearing that new path, to build a system designed specifically to foster talent in America. With such a system in place, we can usher in yet another American century, one that belongs to them and to the children and grandchildren of the students that you work with every day. I thank you again for that vital work, for your dedication to those deserving students, and for your commitment to building a future in which they can truly thrive. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jamie. As we close out this session, we want to say 2 things to you, and we should have listened to you about the song, we didn't. But if you listen to the chorus of the song, it says, "It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine." The world is changing, and I think our message to Lumina is, with more gear up, it may be the end of the world as we know it, but we feel fine. Second thing is, we want to thank you. We know how busy you are, and so to go with that song, I actually found you a skinny tie. that matches the book. Look at that. Pretty good, huh? Well, there you go. Thank you. Thanks so much for being here with us.